It's my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of Advocate Drum's Interviews and Insights. My name is Tom Carmen, and I serve as the chair of Advocate Drum. It is truly an honor for me today to introduce General Michael X. Garrett, the 23rd Commander of the United States Forces Command, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. As commander of the Army's largest organization, he commands 215,000 active duty soldiers and 190,000 members of the Army Reserve, while providing training and readiness oversight of the Army National Guard. In total, Forces Command Team includes 745,000 soldiers and 96,000 civilians. A career infantryman, Garrett received his commission in 1984 upon graduation from Xavier University. General Garrett served in the 75th Ranger Regiment early in his career, amongst many, many other accomplishments. General Garrett spent 6 consecutive years focused on military operations in the Middle East. First as Chief of Staff, U.S. Central Command, and later as Commanding General, United States Army Central and Coalition Forces Land Component Command. We are truly excited to have General Garrett with us today for this interview, and I can tell you I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that you all enjoy it. Advocate Drum also welcomes Alex Hazard back to the interview chair today. Alex is the local lifestyle host on North Country television affiliate ABC 50. Alex moved to the area 6 years ago for what he thought was going to be a very short gig, fell in love with the area and has stayed. We're so fortunate that he did. He's added a lot to our community. I truly hope that all of you enjoy this session today. I know that I'm looking forward to it. Before we begin though, I would like to thank National Grid for their corporate sponsorship of interviews and insights. We couldn't do this without their support. Thank you very much. As I turn this over to Alex, I would like to thank him for his ongoing support of Advocate Drum. Alex, take it away.
Tom, thanks so much. And General, it's an honor to spend some time with you today, so thanks for taking the time.
Well, thanks. I am looking forward, Alex, to spending time with you this afternoon, gushing on Fort Drum, 10th Mountain Division, and the wonderful people up there that take such wonderful care of them.
I think we all think about our legacy at different points in our lives and what legacy we'll have. So one of the things I found fascinating when reading about you is not only this incredible legacy that you're going to leave in your position, but the whole family of yours that has a pretty interesting web. Can you share a bit about both you and your family's story?
Yeah, I was at Fort Benning a couple of days ago and got to participate in a Gold Star event and then a rededication of the National Infantry Museum. And I love going to Fort Benning because that's where I was raised and spent almost 13 years at Fort Benning, Georgia. My dad was a command sergeant major, retired as a command sergeant major in the Army with 35 years of service. When I was a brand new second lieutenant, my dad was my division command sergeant major in the 24th Infantry Division. He, along with the commander at the time, General Schwarzkopf, and not only, my dad and I in service, but I have a sister who retired as a warrant officer, after almost 25 years of service in the MI community. So you're right. I've known nothing but Army my entire life. So this is my 59th year of being alive, and every single day of that has been in and around the Army.
Now, you've served as FORSCOM commander since 2019, so I was hoping you could kind of just break down this role a little bit for the average Joe like me about what your responsibilities are in that role and what you're happy to have accomplished in this time.
Yeah, FORSCOM is it's one of the Army's major commands, ACOM, so Army Major Commands. There are 4 of them now, all commanded by 4-star generals. So you have Forces Command responsible for the readiness of our soldiers. And that's the whole Army. It's not just the active component, but it's also the reserve. and then the National Guard when we mobilize them under Title 10 and put them against our requirements. You have training and doctrine command, another 4-star command, and they're really responsible for people. So think about initial entry training, think about all of the doctrine, think about the organizations that we have. That's what training and the TRADOC commander does. And then you have Army Materiel Command, another 4-star command. They are responsible for supplies. So think about the headquarters, again, responsible to make sure that units have all of the equipment, all of the spare parts, and food and every other class of supply. And then the last ACOM, which is actually the newest, Army Futures Command. That's been in existence now going on 3 years, and it is responsible for the future of our Army. And so, the 6 signature systems, that General Milley and Secretary Esper talked about several years ago. That effort continues under General McConville, Secretary Warmuth, and then the first commander of Army Futures Command, Mike Murray, who is, like I said, 3 years into the position right now. And so the Army, if you think about, what it takes to make an Army run or to have an Army that is capable of fighting and winning, you need all 4 of those commands. As I said, the responsibility of Forces Command is to ensure that our forces are ready to fight. And we measure readiness, broadly in the amount of people, so having the right people in your organizations, having the right equipment in your organizations, and then marrying that up with the right training gives you a ready force. And that is what the ForceCom commander is charged with. So think about 3 weeks ago when we were directed to employ the immediate response force out of Fort Bragg. We were able to do that because of the readiness that we generate and maintain in our Army on any given day. But we also deployed a brigade, a big chunk of 310, 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, the brigade that's down at Fort Polk. And we were able to do that because of the readiness that we generate and maintain for our Army. And so I guess, an analogy would be, ForceCom is the Army's central nervous system, for readiness. And what we do is we connect units, so like 10th Mountain Division, like 310, with requirements. And those requirements are generally, they generally come from our combatant commands.
Now, we've spent the last 2 decades training for and conducting the Iraq and Afghan counterinsurgencies. How will home station training and combat training center rotations kind of change going forward?
Yeah, Alex, I'm glad you brought up, the global war on terror. As I said before, this past weekend on 9/11, I had the honor of being the keynote speaker at the National Entry Museum rededication. And the rededication is really putting the names of soldiers who died in the past year and updating their memorial. But you know what? Look, think about 2001 and think about the 10th Mountain Division and what they have done from 2001 until 2020, right? So started with General Hagenbach, and General Hagenbach was the 1st Division into Afghanistan, followed by General Austin, followed by General Frakley, then General Coates, then General Terry, then Steve Townsend, then Jeff Bannister, then Walt Pyatt, and Brian Minnis, the last commander who just changed out a couple of weeks ago. So the division, 10th Mountain Division, has been deployed or preparing to deploy for the last 20 years. And all of our training that we've been doing for the last 20 years has been geared towards counterinsurgency. That's what we became the best in the world at. But you know, this next fight is not going to be a counterinsurgency fight. It's going to be large-scale combat operations. You know, something very, very similar to what I grew up with. You know, with airland battle doctrine, with the Soviet Union back then as our pacing threat. You know, today we look more to China, but we still look to Russia in terms of near-peer competitors. And so what we've done in our training is, we've gotten away from again, the tasks and battle drills associated with counterinsurgency. And where we are now, we are training all of our forces to operate in a very fast-paced and lethal environment. I mean, if you just go back to the Ukraine, 2.5 years ago, and the number of casualties and equipment that was destroyed in just a couple of salvos, that battlefield is a lot different than the one, that we've spent, the last 20 years fighting on. And so our training focus at both the National Training Center for our armor brigades and our striker brigades, and the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana, for our light brigade combat teams, really have changed their focus to mirror the capabilities of our near peer, Russia, China, if you will. And that's what we've been doing. And it is, it's really marked my time here as a Force Com commander, transitioning again from, a counterinsurgency based force to a force today that, has units, globally focused, right? So we have units in Korea, we have units in Europe, we still have elements in the Middle East. We have forces assigned to both the European theaters and the Indo-PACOM theaters. So that's what we're doing. We have transitioned both of our training centers, and I tell you, the other thing that we've done there is modernized, the threat. So if you were to go to both or either training center, one of the challenges that we have now is how do you combat unmanned aerial vehicles? Some that you can buy off the shelf, put a grenade on it, and now you have a lethal means of attacking, forces. There are drone swarms. We have the ability to conduct cyber operations against our units. We have ability to conduct electronic warfare assessments and operations. And then we also have, the indirect fires, so rockets, massive artillery, that defines this next fight that we really didn't see or that we haven't seen over the last 20 years.
Well, and we know, of course, that can all kind of get expensive. So as the Army develops the annual budget requests for Congress, what's the Force Comms commander's role in balancing those resources you were just talking about with things like readiness, equipment, payroll, so forth in that regard?
This is something that, I get asked the question a lot, and this is really something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. The first meeting that I had as the Force Com commander with the secretary, who was Secretary Esper, I believe. Actually, it was Secretary McCarthy. He was acting secretary, and General Milley. And, one of the things that I said in that meeting is that, during my time as a Force Com commander, we were going to have to be a lot more precise in the amount of readiness, that we delivered. And, we've talked about this before, when I say before, over the last 20 years, and even beyond that, this is a large bill for the Army, and if we want to continue to be to maintain our advantage over our adversaries, and that really comes from our training and the readiness that we get from our training. And if we want to maintain, our modernization efforts, which is really the future readiness of our Army, then we got to, what I tell people is we have to get the most out of every dollar that we are given. And so, our goal here is to produce, with a little bit more precision than we have in the past, the exact amount of readiness that we need, and not a whole bunch more, because all of that additional readiness that does not get employed, again, takes away from our modernization efforts, perhaps, and it certainly, doesn't help us, when we start talking about our people first activities.
Shifting gears here for a bit, the Army, just like all of our local businesses and organizations, sometimes has to deal with serious things like discrimination. So what's the Army doing to improve important issues like diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, again, something I spend a lot of time talking about. And, one of the things about big, large, complex organizations is that it takes a lot of organizational energy to move them off of, one path and put them on another. And generally, when that happens, you've got to be, firmly in control of the organization and be able to, make micro adjustments so that you don't over react. And that's what we've tried to do over the last, 20 months, if you will. It started with the absolutely horrible murder of Specialist Vanessa Guillen, and then the light, that was shown on to Fort Hood, followed by the independent review committee that conducted a very thorough and exhaustive investigation there. The Army took those findings. I directed another investigation, a little bit more narrow, into command climate and leadership. We've received back, the results of those investigations. And what they did is they allowed us to talk to, just about all of the soldiers there at Fort Hood to get their insights, or to gain their insight and get their feedback, on everything from sexual harassment, assault, command climate, inside of our organizations. And what our Army leadership did as we looked at this, and it's a very nuanced position. When the Army changed its number one priority to people, we were making a statement more than we were changing what we were doing in the Army. I mean, people have always been a priority for us. I mean, you can't have an Army if you don't have people. And they are the most important thing. But, for years, we've gone back and forth with, people first, mission always, and a number of other, phrases that tried to, lay out and, provide a picture for how we are doing both of those things, right? Managing our people. And so the last 20 months, we have spent a lot of time and effort on implementing not just the independent review committee's findings, but things, that we were doing in the Army before. The Sergeant Major of the Army's, This Is My Squad initiative, which is really, I think, gets to our biggest challenge. And I think where, the effort that we put into this will be most beneficial. And that is, this golden triangle, right? So think about a triangle and think about in the middle of that triangle, you've got your soldier. And what you want that soldier to be connected with, you want him to be connected with his family. You want him to be connected, with the leader, and you want to make sure that he's got a buddy, right? Somebody that is paying attention to him. As we've looked again, so we're transitioning from this counterinsurgency focus to large scale combat operations. I just gave you, that's the division. So, 9 deployments from the 10th Mountain Division, over the last 20 years. So think about it. Alex, well, you live up there. I mean, you're up there. You know the impact, right? You are either deployed, so gone, or you are either coming back, and then preparing to deploy again. But the units up there have been on this constant churn, and that has certainly, not only has it impacted people, but it's impacted relationships. It's changed the way that we deal with one another. And so with our people first initiatives, at the base, the foundational thing that we're trying to do is to improve relationships, between our soldiers and their leaders. We're trying to, to coach and teach and provide examples for young sergeants and staff sergeants and young lieutenants, to have effective, relationships with their soldiers. It's amazing, Alex, the things that I did growing up, and how, and an example of that is, I mean, I knew every single soldier in my platoon as a platoon leader. I knew when their birthdays were. I knew certainly who was married, who wasn't married. Back then, you didn't have, the only thing you could do to talk to somebody was either write them a letter, which we would do, so a regular handwritten letter with a stamp on it, and we would call them, right? Well, that's what we're asking our soldiers, to do now. We're asking, our soldiers, to connect with families in ways that we haven't, in the recent past, and it's making a difference. But like I said, our people first actions and activities really are making a difference. But one of the other areas that I spend a lot of time on, though, is finding that balance, for Forces Command and the portion of the Army that we're responsible for here, that ensures that we are ready. And to my earlier point about trying to pull us back maybe just a little bit is, for the last 6 or 7 months, I start most of my conversations, with, doesn't matter who I'm talking to, with, this question, why does our Army exist? And our Army exists for one reason. Our Army exists to fight and to win our nation's wars. That's it. That's why we exist. And, every day we have got to be able to do that. But, I think with our Army's priorities of people, readiness, and modernization, and then, having commanders who are agile enough, to articulate to their subordinate leaders that, hey, you know what, today may seem like readiness if you're out in the field, or if you're at the National Training Center, or if you're preparing for a deployment, readiness may feel like it's the priority of the day. If you are having, if you have the opportunity, to speak to the Secretary of the Army about, racism, sexual assault and harassment, it may feel like, we are focusing more on people. And then if you're in a unit, like the 1st Cavalry Division and other units, 1st Cavalry Division is fielding our most modern tank, the M1A2 SEP V3. You might feel like, modernization is, the priority, for your unit. But our goal is, as I said before, is to manage all 3 of those things. But taking care of our people, addressing, sexual harassment and assault, suicides, is really, really important for us, and racism, extremism, and discrimination is very, very important for us.
To that same sort of note, we know the importance of mental health and the issues with PTSD within the Army. In my research for this interview, I kind of stumbled across a video about ways that you're trying to combat this and take this on head on. So I wanted to ask you to kind of talk for a moment about the leg tuck challenge and my favorite part, which was just doing one more than the day before, and why that's so important.
Yeah, yeah, I did. We got a little bit of traction for that, but I tell you what, though, the leg tuck challenge there, that was certainly not my idea. I copied a great idea from the sergeant major of the Army or wherever this thing started. I think it was, we weren't going to pour cold water on people's heads. And, we wanted to do something that, folks would benefit from, and actually something that, we're challenged a little bit with in the Army. At least back then we were. And so, we came up with here the leg tuck challenge. But I do think, if I think about when we did that, Alex, and where we are today, boy, we have in a number of our divisions efforts specifically aimed at providing routinizing almost behavioral health care. Some of the high-end units in our Army, they have requirements to seek behavioral health care often. And I think it's any, significant event in your life requires you to go sit down with somebody. What we're trying to do, we have a division out in Kansas, the 1st Infantry Division's pilot. The commander there, General Sims, and his focus is on routinizing, access to care and reducing, the stigma that is still unfortunately associated with seeking behavioral health. And so his goal is for every soldier in his division to have a behavioral health appointment with a behavioral health specialist, once or twice a year as routine maintenance. And we're doing more and more of this across the Army. And so, behavioral health has always been a challenge for us. Some of the challenges, having sufficient behavioral health specialists to provide, the access, that our soldiers require. But, not just Forces Command, but this has been an Army priority, especially, one of our people first initiatives.
Well, I have to tell you, when I see videos like that, it makes me hope that we get the right leaders in the right places like you.
When I talk to you about modernization, like most people, your mind probably goes to equipment, right? Some new tank or some new helicopter, some new artillery piece. But I tell you what, I think one of the biggest changes, the most innovation in terms of the Army is probably going to be people. Think about
the selection process changing.
Yeah, well, I tell you, it's amazing. Before the battalion commander's assessment program, we had been managing, our soldiers and promoting them and putting them in command based on, a board process that really hadn't changed for decades, right? The technology changed, right? So instead of maybe scratching on a piece of paper, now you're doing it on a computer. But the way that we did it really did not change. And it was really based on reports. So reading, an officer's reports, and then, with a group of people, rank ordering, and then putting them against the requirement. Well, I'll tell you what we're doing today is, it really is amazing, right? So battalion commanders, there's still a board that comes up with an ordinal, kind of ranking of folks. But all that does now is get you to Fort Leavenworth, where you have an opportunity to compete with everybody else for command. And what's amazing over the last couple of years are the number of people that we have chosen. In the past, maybe they would have been on the alternate list, right? So we always have a primary list, and then we have an alternate list because things happen. But what BCAP has done is, it's given everybody the same opportunity. And there have been a number of folks who have moved up from the alternate list into command, to the primary list, and very high in some cases. That wouldn't have happened in years past. And so we did that for a couple of years, refining the battalion commander assessment program. We're about to do our second colonel command assessment program. We have a program that we are about to institute for command sergeants major. So it's Alex, I will tell you, of all of the modernizing and innovating that we've done in the Army over the last several years, I think this is probably the most impactful modernizing that we're doing, modernizing the way that we manage our Army's talent. And it's only going to get better. We are the active component is on the cusp of integrating the Integrated Pay and Personnel System Army, IPSA, which again, we've been managing officers, NCOs, and soldiers the same way since World War II almost. And this is going to fundamentally change that and give us a view of people, not just, Mike Garrett, officer of infantry, but 25 parameters, that allow the Army, to put people into positions where they are best suited, and for us to know, what people, what talents they have. For instance, as we work our way through this, the temporary safe havens that we have established inside of the United States, where we're housing our Afghan personnel and evacuees, one of the big requirements up front was for interpreters. And the Army does have we've gotten better over the years, but once we get IPSA fully up and operational, the Army will be able to query not just the active component, but the 1.1 million soldiers in the whole Army, so the active, guard, and the reserves.
Well, shifting gears once again here, I know that you and your wife got to come here to Fort Drum. So before we go, I thought it would be fun if you could just maybe share some highlights with our audience of your time here with the soldiers and their families here at Fort Drum.
Yeah, so, and I'm not going to get this right because I don't have it on my card in front of me, but, we got to watch, and it was wonderful, the history of the 10th Mountain Division in World War II and the community that was, that established there in Colorado based on, the soldiers, from the 10th Mountain Division. And so, we got to watch this really, really neat movie, and we got to spend some time reflecting on, the history and the origin of the 10th Mountain Division. But what I did, and it's what I always do, so as I walked out of the theater, the first person I bumped into was a PFC, and I just and even today, if I have the opportunity to talk to you and engage you, I'm going to do it, and it's usually trying to gain a perspective that I don't easily get during my travels or from this office here at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I talked to this PFC who just happened to be from North Carolina. And, he'd been in the unit for 6 months. And it was an opportunity for me to ask him, how he felt about being in the 10th Mountain Division. And I think, Alex, this is, going to reflect, this is an example of Fort Drum and the surrounding communities and the North Country. He felt very, very welcomed. When he arrived to the division, he felt welcomed, by the people. This is a PFC, mind you. At 6 months, who had an opinion on some of this stuff. The 10th Mountain Division has always been one of the best trained divisions in our Army. And I don't know if it's, who we put there. But if you look at that long list of commanders, one of the things that, if you were Mike Garrett, that you would notice in that group is that, there's some of the best trainers probably in the history of our Army, counted among those 9 commanders that I mentioned to you earlier. And so, the ability for our units to train up there. And this is another thing that's important, we don't get complaints from, folks in the North Country when our helicopters are flying around and, when our artillery is fired, because they know the importance of it. That's not the case everywhere. And again, that's just another, indication of the community. The other piece is, and it's a lot like Alaska. I've never been stationed at Fort Drum. I've had the opportunity to travel there a number of times in this job, and I can remember the first time I went up there. I was a lieutenant colonel in the 18th Airborne Corps. General Hagenbach was the division commander, and I went up from the Corps to be a part of his division CPX before they deployed. I remember doing that. But I have spent a lot of time in Alaska, right? So I have spent time in an environment, that's similar. And what Alaska, and I think what places like Fort Drum have, and the people that live there, is the benefit of everybody kind of going through a shared hardship, and that shared hardship, at Fort Drum is really the winter and the weather.
Not for all of us, but for some.
Yeah. But it is. I mean, it's one of the things that defines, the 10th Mountain Division. It's one of the things that, they are very, very, proud of, and what they do. I mean, we just had a company, I think, from the 10th Mountain Division, training down in South America. I want to say it was Peru, Chile. It was Chile, and they were up in the Andes training, and I tell you what, here's how good that training was. They were down there for several weeks, and I don't know what the exact temperatures were, but they were at 14, 15, whatever the altitude they were working at. And it was really, really cold, and they were out there for a few days, and they had no cold weather injuries. And I know how hard that is, and to do, having spent time in Alaska, and usually that only happens because you have good leaders, and units, are built from, individuals that are, disciplined, fit, highly trained. And part of cohesive teams and squads. But I tell you, I just for the people up there, Alex, thank you to everybody for how you have always embraced our soldiers and our families up there. I mean, we rely on the local community for everything. There are no schools on Fort Drum. There's no hospital on Fort Drum. And so we are very, very appreciative for the support that we have received.
Well, General, we are so appreciative of you and your time and the support that you are giving all of us here in the Fort Drum region. So thank you for taking the time, and really just an honor to spend time with you this afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex.